Well, we have some updates coming in from Sri Lanka. A journalist was attacked by the security forces. The journalist was covering the ongoing protests on the streets of the capital. Well, let's move on now. Let's go across to our guests to discuss what is going to happen next in Sri Lanka. We have Ranga Jayasurya, columnist of Daily Mirror, joining us on the broadcast, along with the Professor Asanga Abheyagunasekara, strategic advisor, senior fellow at the Millennium Project, Washington, D.C., and Madhavan Narayanan, senior journalist. Thank you very much for joining us, gentlemen. Good evening to all of you. I first want to come to you, Mr. Ranga Jayasurya. Given the situation in Sri Lanka at this point of time, the president has fled, the Prime Minister has stepped down. There needs to be political stability first before discussions begin, action is taken as far as the economic recovery is concerned.
Yes, in fact, today there was an all-party meeting, all-party leaders meeting, where they decided to ask the president and the prime minister to resign, and they will appoint the speaker as the interim president for a period of 1 month. And after within that period, the parliament has to nominate a prime minister from within its members. So this interim government will carry on for 1 year, the maximum, leading to the elections and a new constitution. So that's the position at the moment. That's what has been agreed. But we are yet to see whether the president will resign, because the prime minister has already indicated he would resign. He is trapped in his residence in Colombo, but the president apparently is not in the country at the moment. Or there are certain reports that he has left in one of the naval ships, SLNS Gajabahu, which was given by the U.S. Some time back. It's probably the largest ship Sri Lanka has. So apparently he's not in the country. Where the two ships left the Colombo port today, and some people say he was among the people who left. So at least there is no indication as to where the president is right now. And
so well, you know, some reports suggest that he told Mr. Wickremesinghe that whatever the party leaders decide will be acceptable to him. Do you think it is going to be that easy? Do you think consensus will be built as far as the candidates who would be taking charge is concerned now? Next. Mr. Jayasurya, are you still with us?
Yes, yeah. Can you go ahead? Can you repeat the question, please?
Well, I was just asking for confirmation on some reports that suggest that the president told Mr. Wickremesinghe that he'll be okay with whatever decision the party leaders take next.
Yeah, actually, he has been saying that again and again, but he doesn't act upon his words. So that has been the problem. So this time also, for instance, after his brother, the elder Mahinda Rajapaksa resigned, he said he will be okay with clipping his powers as the executive president. But then when the 22nd amendment was, the bill for the 22nd amendment was introduced, so basically he is keeping all those powers, which the new provisions will be applicable only after the end of the term of his presidency and the end of the term of this parliament. So he has a at the moment he's been sort of pushed to the wall, but he might be saying different things at different moments. So what the country is waiting for is to hear that he is resigning, but that will to a great extent will solve the political crisis, but we will be having a major financial crisis which we'll have to address next.
Absolutely. Mr. Jayasurya, I request you to stay on with us. I want to bring in Madhavan Narayanan. What is happening in Sri Lanka has been described as the Arab Spring-like moment. It is happening in our neighborhood. India so far has provided assistance, but how far can India go in terms of assistance to secure this ally, knowing fully well that China will utilize the opportunity? How is India looking at the crisis?
Well, from what I can understand,
I think we just lost that line with Mr. Narayanan. We'll fix that. We'll get him back on the broadcast and take that comment. Meanwhile, let me go across to Professor Abhay Gunasekara. I hope I'm getting your name right, Professor. What do you think is going to be the impact of this crisis in Sri Lanka, both the political and the economic crisis, in the geopolitical scenario? Also, do you believe this political instability might affect talks with IMF of the restructuring of the debt, of waiving off the debt?
Yes, definitely. It is a serious chaotic situation right now. The country has moved to an anarchic situation because the president placed the military between himself and the people. He asked to basically to choose. And this is a dangerous exercise which President Gotabaya did, having an option to choose. So the people, now 71 people have been injured today, and you can see complete dysfunctionality of the political system. And what you see is clearly an Arab Spring movement in Sri Lankan political history. People are angry for the irrational decisions that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and also the Prime Minister, who took several weeks ago, he appointed a casino boss to the cabinet. So these are irrational decisions taken. So they're angry for the autocratic rule of the Rajapaksas, the corruption, and also the economic condition. So the political dysfunctionality is a serious element. Basically, it's very important to have the political, sustainability of functioning political government to have the economic prosperity of the country. So the donors and funders will look for political stability.
Will this have an impact, like I was asking you, will this have an impact with the talks with IMF?
No, definitely, because we haven't even reached a staff level agreement still. Debt restructuring has to be done. So a plan would have to be given on debt restructuring in August. So all this have to be done. So you need a functioning government in place. So right now you don't have a functioning government because of the situation right now. So the people have stormed the president's building, as you've seen, and all that. So I think the anarchic situation needs to be immediately addressed, where the speaker would have to appoint a leader back in 7 days' time, which is the interim government as well as the president. And Sri Lanka would need to go for immediate elections I would say in several months.
All right, Madhavan Narayanan is back with us. So we lost you there for a couple of seconds, but please complete your point.
The point is that India has made big sacrifices in Sri Lanka. We lost the former Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi to an assassination. We provided all sorts of aid in the past, and even now we provided $3.5 billion and 4,000 tons of grain. But India has no say, no quid pro quo, no security assurance to Sri Lanka. I think India should use this opportunity to actually engage Sri Lanka with a very clear-cut transact motive to not only lift the Sri Lankan economy up as a major economy with the neighborhood, which is just 20 miles away, another speaking. So we need to have a proper plan in place. We only seem to have a lot of goodwill, but actually what we need is hard diplomacy. We need some kind of a paralleling the IMF. IMF may actually give aid to Sri Lanka. First of all, there's a big mess out there because things are too slow if you compare it with what India did in 1991 when we faced our economy. Right? So what we need to do is to, on the one hand, act like a guide for Sri Lanka on how to go out with the IMF. I think it's not a matter of sovereignty, it's a matter of friendly help. And the other thing is to engage more actively, because given China's interest in Sri Lanka and given India's strategic interest in Sri Lanka, we need to be more active than we are right now. We are, from all we see goodwill, but goodwill is nice to see on paper. Soft diplomacy is nice to see on paper. But given that we have high stakes there, please remember India fought, many Indian soldiers gave up their lives. extreme sacrifices in Sri Lanka. Not only in 1970 when Rajiv Gandhi and but even in 1971, it went into Sri Lanka to help quell the Maoist rebellion of the Janata Vimukti Peramuna. We need to have a hard head.
Okay, I want to take a comment from Mr. Jayasurya on that. Mr. Jayasurya, what is the sentiment on ground in terms of assistance that you're expecting from the neighboring countries?
Yeah, actually, if you see the Sri Lanka situation, the government of Rajapaksa, they heavily relied on China. Then they expected the Chinese would come to their help. So, but at the end, what you see is they gave them the boot, and it was India that filled the the vacuum. So now we have been in a situation that we might have outlived Indian generosity. So, and as my former speaker said, I think we have received about nearly 4 billion in terms of loans and other sort of credit lines. So, but still Sri Lanka need another 5 to 6 billion US dollars of bridging finance just to sustain the basic government services and for the rest of this year. So we are in a situation where that Sri Lanka has to rely on more organized way of getting foreign aid. But the government, the Sri Lankan government, until now, their approach has been it's very ad hoc. They rely on India for so much that until the last shipment of oil was exhausted, we didn't find any other sources. So that's partly why we are experiencing this major fuel crisis at the moment. So to be honest, Sri Lanka has very, very few options at the moment until we get a financial facility, so sort of financing from the IMF. I agreed on the major bailout package.
Right, but if the political crisis is not resolved in time, that will only delay as far as the economic recovery process is concerned. I want to go across to Professor Abhay Gunasekara with a very specific question. Just like Sri Lanka, there are a lot of countries that have actually taken huge amounts as loans, as debt from the Chinese for infrastructure development in their countries. Should this situation in Sri Lanka today be a lesson to those countries?
Definitely. I mean, this is what I've been talking about in the last several months. Pakistan is one good example. The Belt and Road countries, which have borrowed significantly from China, has a vulnerability to fall like Sri Lanka. So would have to, Sri Lanka is a case study which many countries can study, as well as understand how an autocratic regime with an ultra-nationalist inward policies and Chinese bandwagoning foreign policy, which followed by Rajapaksa regime, how it went wrong. And Dr. Jayasurya mentioned earlier, so it was a clear China bandwagoning policy, but now you can see they have abandoned the situation, because why would they come to rescue at this particular moment? Because you can see every single Sri Lankan is against the regime. And because of their irrational decisions, 16 people have died, mothers, children, they are suffering, there's no medicine. We need about 500 to 600 million every month for the fuel. We don't have money to pay. So there is no funding, there is no foreign reserves. So India has amazingly come forward with $3.5 billion of assistance. So India is playing a pivotal role here. But it is a lesson. Sri Lanka is a lesson to many countries in South Asia. The BRI, especially on the heavy debt.
All right. Well, domestic politics has also been affected by what is happening in Sri Lanka. Stay on with us, gentlemen. After Sri Lanka's civil uprising, the Congress party has drawn the India-Lanka link, and the Congress Neta predicts similar fate of the Modi Sarkar. Mr. Udit Raj, in fact, has tweeted, and he says the situation in India is similar to that of Sri Lanka. Jaivir Shergill has also tweeted the same. Let's go across to Shehzad Poonawala, BJP spokesperson, joining us on the broadcast. Shehzad Poonawala, Udit Raj and Jaivir Shergill there sounding alarm bells, saying that the situation in India is similar to that of Sri Lanka. Jaivir Shergill says don't take or never take the public for granted.
You see, it's the intellectual bankruptcy of the Congress party that a country which has less than 50 million in foreign exchange reserves is being compared to a country which has almost $600 billion in foreign exchange reserves. Today, we are the fastest, largest growing economy in the world. We are a country that is being hailed as one of the fastest growing economies. So, this doomsday prediction is being done by those who like to keep always using these issues and platforms to undermine India internationally. But yes, Sri Lanka's main crisis is because of three factors. One is Parivarwaad, the other is corruption, and the third is these freebies that were being promised. I think who indulges in all these three things, I guess we understand already from the politics of certain parties in India. So I think it would be a cautionary note for them.
Right. One other factor for the crisis in Sri Lanka is the huge debts that they took for infrastructure development from China. Do you think this is just an opportunity being used by the Congress party to hit out at the center, using Sri Lanka as an example? Jaivir Shergill, in fact, also went on to say that presidential pool can be used by public at any time. So the BJP needs to understand the difference between managing economy and embarking on misadventures.
The entire world is actually holding China and China's debt trap and China's policies responsible for a lot of the destabilization that we see across the world. But, trust in Congress to come in the defense of China. In fact, Rahul Gandhi, while he was abroad, also said that China offers a very promising perspective to many countries. So, China को कैसे अच्छा दिखाना है और भारत की बदनामी कैसे करनी है, ये निरंतर प्रयास रहता है कांग्रेस पार्टी का, और इसी दिशा में उदित राज फिर से बोल रहे हैं.
All right, Shehzad Poonawala, thank you for joining us with your views. I want to go back to our guests and let's see if we have Mr. Madhavan Narayanan. Before I go across to him, I'll come to you, sir, for a comment on that. But before that, we have some breaking inputs coming in. Ranil Wickremesinghe's house, his private house, private residence, has been set on fire. That's the latest that we are picking up. First, we saw the protesters barging into the presidential palace and then the Prime Minister's house. Now we are being told that his private residence has been targeted. It has been set on fire. So unprecedented scenes being witnessed on the streets of the capital in Sri Lanka as the crisis, both political and economic, in fact, worsens. Let's go back to our guests. Ranga Jayasurya, first we saw the protesters barging inside the presidential palace. Then the Prime Minister house was targeted next. In fact, one can understand the anger, one can understand the frustration, but this has to be controlled.
Yeah, of course. And actually, these protests are largely peaceful. If you see, unless in the instances where the police fired tear gas, forcing the people to withdraw, sort of pull back, there were no instances. There were very few, if I say, very instances of violence. So this is it's an exceptional case. This is what is happening. There was an incident where the journalists were attacked, and I think the police also using excessive force, which can also sort of instigate the public. So I think that the situation has been largely calming down since the all-party leaders meeting where they issued those commitments to ask the president and the prime minister to resign. So that is important because
Mr. Jayasurya, please stay on with us. Times Now contributor King Ratnam is joining us on the broadcast with the latest on what we are reporting. Please share with us more details. Reports coming in that the private residence of Ranil Wickremesinghe has been set on fire.
Yes, we have unconfirmed reports that it has been set on fire, but we know that the violence escalated there after some media personnel were attacked by the police there. And following that event, some of the protesters barged into the private residence of the Prime Minister and violence escalated. And we hear that we are hearing unconfirmed reports that it's set on fire, and the violence is actually pretty bad, yes.
All right, Mr. Ratnam, thank you very much for sharing those details with us. With that, we are also completely out of time on this debate. But of course, India will be very, very closely monitoring the situation unfolding in Sri Lanka, both the political instability and the economic crisis as well. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us, for giving us your time and sharing your views with us.